Cersei, you crazy. Most of us can all agree that Cersei Lannister has turned out to be one of, if not the greatest villain in Game of Thrones. Now, of course, we've got this big bad, the Night King, but he's much like Thanos in the sense that he doesn't really discriminate and just kills everybody around him. The way that Cersei Lannister plays the game, she tends to have a lot more impact when her hand is involved with the death of others. And in Game of Thrones Season 8, we kind of expect for her to all have this master plan. If she's anything like how she was in Season 6, she's likely been plotting this entire time and has a super master plan that she didn't even share with Jaime about what she's gonna do in regards to Jon Snow, Daenerys, and the threat of the Night King. And in this video, I'm gonna discuss several potential leaks that involve Cersei Lannister in Game of Thrones Season 8. As always, these leaks are to be taken with a grain of salt and are more or less for entertainment purposes. As always, here's your spoiler warning. Before we get started, please slap a like on this video as the like goal is going to be 1,420. Also, make sure you're subscribed, and then, this is the most important part, make sure you have your notifications turned on so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long night. Lena Headey actually gave an interview in which I think it's going to be included on the Game of Thrones Season 8 DVD commentary, but in this interview, she talks about Cersei Lannister, the current Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, and her journey throughout the entirety of this series. And I'm not going to lie, out of all the other actors, when they're giving these sorts of interviews, I feel like Lena Headey understands her character the most. If you just listen to her describe her character the way that she does, you really get more of an understanding and sort of a bit of a soft spot in your heart for Cersei Lannister. Now, I've mentioned this before in several videos and people always tend to comment. I hate Cersei Lannister with a passion, but I love Lena Headey. She is one of the best actresses on the planet, and in my opinion, of all time. But anytime I comment about her in the sense of saying how I appreciate her as a character and how we hate her, but we also have some sympathy for her, sometimes we feel some remorse for what her character has to go through, there's always like 10 to 50 comments of people saying, whoa dude, what the fuck, speak for yourself. We hate Cersei Lannister and everything she's done, she deserves. Now you see, here's the thing. Every single character in A Song of Ice and Fire, whether you see them as stark good or stark bad, are shades of gray. If you are in fact a human being, it's impossible to watch this show and not feel some type of way when Cersei has poop smeared on her damn shoulder, or when this jackass flashes his ding dong when Cersei's at her lowest point. To be honest, I think I felt the most bad for her when Myrcella returns. Cersei had went through all that shit in Season 5, and then in Season 6, we get to see a little bit at the light at the end of a tunnel from her character's perspective, and that being Myrcella, the one person that Tyrion sent away who was arguably innocent and didn't deserve to be put into, a completely new situation around people who are potentially her enemies, and then she comes back dead. Cersei didn't really deserve that for her daughter, so when she comes back, we're all thinking, hell yeah, we're gonna get to see a little bit of humanness to Cersei. But then she arrives dead. In the preceding conversation she has with Jaime knocks away that little bit of pity that you feel for her because she immediately blames him. Jaime really has nothing to do with this situation, and the fact that Cersei is angry and lashes out against Jaime, who is going through a redemption arc in and of himself, we sort of feel less pity for Cersei. And this is exactly what her character does. They ping pong across the screen. We're meant to not really know how we feel about this person, except for the fact that we can label them as an evil character. But if we switch everything around and this story is being told from the Lannister sides, well then still fuck the Lannisters because they're assholes. But no, if we take this seriously and the show was told from the perspective of the Lannisters, we'd probably get something more along the lines of a love story or forbidden love that was never meant to be between Jaime and Cersei. We would probably get a lot more of a romantic element or a romantic side to Jaime and Cersei. Maybe it's something more like Cersei, who gets abused by her husband Robert, is comforted by Jaime, and then the relationship develops from there. It would still be sick, it would still be disgusting, but if it were being told from the Lannister point of view, we would all have a lot more sympathy for characters like Cersei Lannister. I mean, come on, we've had this guy bang his aunt, and we've literally gotten 2 years of memes of people praising the act of both sex. I feel like fans can be a little bit choosy when it comes to which characters they allow to commit incest and which characters they don't. But one thing's for certain, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Cersei Lannister will have a master plan, and according to Lena Headey in the interview that I was referencing earlier, going into Season 8, Cersei's going to be terrified. She mentions in the interview, and specifically at the dragon pit, when Daenerys arrives on her dragon, everyone's sort of awestruck and sort of steps back like, holy shit, dragons are real. Cersei, on the other hand, is playing a game. Yes, she's terrified, especially when the white jumps at her, but she tries to put a game face on, meaning that she does not want to show fear in front of her enemies. Lena also mentions in that same interview that the scene with Jaime really hurt her as a character. She felt like Jaime was the last person who loved her in this world, and what she really wants to say in those moments right before Jaime walks out is, no, please don't go, please stay, I need you now more than ever. But she doesn't. She still continually plays the game. So what we take away from all that is Cersei is going to be a lonely, scared, pissed off individual at the start of the season. So judging from her character's previous track record, we know she's got some twist in store for the final season. I think everyone sort of wants to know what her master plan is, so that way we kind of know what to be expecting. And if you'll go back and rewatch season 7, the conversation that her and Jaime has in Game of Thrones season 7 episode 7 pretty much says it all. She tells Jaime exactly what her plans are. While Jon and Daenerys are up north dealing with a northern threat in the Night King, she plans on reuniting the Seven Kingdoms under her banner. So the first steps we're going to see her take next season, obviously she sent Euron to go get the Golden Company, but I don't feel like they're going to show up until maybe episode 2 or even episode 3, the episode that we know the biggest battle of all time is going to be going down in. For the most part, the starter for a season is likely going to be doing something similar to what she did at the start of season 7, which was meeting with Southern Lords and trying to have them pledge their fealty to her. Now, I'm not really sure what she thinks is going to happen once Jon and Daenerys find out about this, but I am very interesting to see. They obviously won't react too well, but I feel like Sansa and Daenerys may want to do something about Cersei's threat to the south, but Jon's going to try to convince them that they need to stay up north and deal with her after the threat of the Night King. But enough speculation aside, let's go ahead and jump into these leaks. Now, leaks always in air quotations there, as they're meant to be taken with a grain of salt and are for nothing but entertainment purposes. This leak was sent to me over on the DMs through Twitter, where you can follow me at Sir_Hunts. Now, the format of this leak was a little bit weird. They had 4 separate characters: Jon Snow, Cersei, Daenerys, and Tyrion, and then below that, they had all of what their interactions were going to be in Season 8. Now, most of them were Hawk Tuohy horseshit, but the one for Cersei was a bit interesting. It actually tied in the pictures that we have of her and Jon Snow, which were some of the first leaks that we saw from Game of Thrones Season 8. And just sort of summarizing some of the info from those leaks here, but this person mentions that in episode 5, Daenerys will succumb to her injuries. Apparently, she gets wounded earlier on in the season when the Night King first attacks Winterfell. It seems like a flesh wound, and everyone's not initially concerned, but after a while, I guess after a few episodes, Maester Woken is unable to heal her. In the end, Jon ends up losing Daenerys and their child. Sansa then attempts to comfort Jon and remind him that he needs to make a decision on how they're going to deal with Cersei, and Jon Snow replies with an alliance. He says he does not want to lose anymore, and an alliance would ensure that the Starks will remain. Now, obviously, the Daenerys dying bit is a load of horseshit, but the fact that she gets injured sort of made my ears perk up, because there was a bunch of foreshadowing for that in Game of Thrones Season 7. Continuing on with the leak here, Tyrion advises Jon against this. He mentions how Cersei will betray them first chance she gets. He says Daenerys wouldn't have wanted it this way. Jon exclaims with tears in his eyes that Daenerys didn't want any of this. The scene then ends with Jon leaving Tyrion's chambers and beginning the journey down to King's Landing. The next episode picks up with Jon meeting with Cersei. She demands that he bend the knee. Jon unwillingly does this. He says, in return for me bending the knee, I want you to never set foot in the north. Cersei mentions that it's a barren wasteland, so why would she ever travel there? She ends the meeting by telling Jon that she demands he turn over Tyrion for treason. Jon, of course, refuses this, but she tells him to take the night to think it over. Jon heads back to camp to inform Tyrion of the news. After this, there is a long, drawn-out conversation, but ultimately, Tyrion decides that he will turn himself in on behalf of the Starks. He says that if his death would prevent many others from dying, then so be it. The series ends with Tyrion being beheaded in the Dragon Pit, with Cersei and her new, that's in quotations there, council presiding over the trial. Now, clearly, this person has been paying attention to the spoilers. For the most part, I don't really see any of that going down, aside from the fact of Jon meeting with Daenerys at some point last season. Now, I know I sway back and forth about these pictures all the time, and I also like to remind you guys that I sway back and forth about the legitimacy of these pictures. But for the most part, for the last several months, I've been leaning on the fact that these are legit. There's no way they would have taken all of this camera operating equipment just to go up there and film a few scenes that are never going to appear in Game of Thrones Season 8. What's interesting to me is that when these pictures pictures first surfaced, the rumor that was surrounding them was that they're from later on in the season. They're not from earlier on in the season like everyone suspects. Also, the list of directors for each episode of the final season has been out for a while now. We've also known that Dan and Dave are set to direct the last episode. So is this why Dan Weiss is up there chilling next to Jon and Cersei? If the Battle of Winterfell is set to take place in episode 3, and if Jon and Daenerys arrive to Winterfell in episode 1, there's no way that these pictures are from before then. Episode 3 is halfway through the season. So if these pictures are legit, they have to take place in episode 4, 5, or 6. And I know I just said that likely the only thing that's true from that leak is the meeting between Jon Snow and Daenerys, but the other stuff is just hard for me to believe. Now, I've mentioned this before in my videos. Sometimes when a leak comes out that you don't think is legit at all and you just immediately call bullshit on it, sometimes that's because it contains details to shit that you do not want to see happen on screen. One of the things I don't want to see happen on screen is Daenerys dying and Jon Snow bending the knee to Cersei. Who the hell would ever want Game of Thrones to end like that aside from Dan and Dave? This is their story. This is their adaptation of George's novels. And obviously George's novels are going to end in a vastly different way, for the main reason being because there's more characters. But Dan and Dave absolutely love for the villain to come out on top. So at the beginning of this series, we're shown the Starks and the Lannisters. We're shown the good guys and the bad guys right off the gate. But one thing we're shown about the good guys with Ned beheading the deserter of the Night's Watch is that even though sometimes you don't want to do your duty, you have to. You're an honorable person and you do what's best for the kingdom and what's best for the North. And then we're shown the Lannisters, who are the bad guys, but seemingly they always win and they always sort of come out on top. So why would the series end in any different way? For example, Jon Snow bending the knee to Cersei and basically surrendering the North is something that no one really wants to see, but arguably it's for the benefit of the kingdom. If Jon Snow bends the knee to Cersei, he can guarantee her that the North is no longer a threat and no longer an open rebellion. And then in return, Cersei can promise that the North will be allowed back into the Seven Kingdoms and she will not do anything to harm them. Obviously, Jon would be a fool to trust the word of a Lion Queen, but has he proven any differently in the past? You don't even need to answer that question because we all know. It's hell no. Jon is an honorable fool, much like his father, Ned Stark. And now I'm not going to touch too much on Tyrion's execution or trial or whatever the hell you want to call it too much in this video because I've done like 17 videos on that in the past. But if it does in fact end with Tyrion being beheaded, now that's major symbolism for way back to the very first episode, and I was just talking about this when Will, a deserter of the Night's Watch, is executed by Ned Stark. Now Ned Stark doesn't hear him out. We all saw what Will saw, which was White Walkers, which honestly, if you see a fucking zombie in the snow and you don't run, you're kind of an idiot, deserting whatever quest you had, previously set out upon. But he's killed, and we all as the audience know that it's not willfully so, but it's Ned Stark's job to do this. Just like with Jon bending the knee. Jon's the king of the North. Jon's ultimate goal and his ultimate job is to save the people of the North, to lead them to a better future. Sometimes the way to lead is to follow. So Jon Snow bending the knee and doing something he doesn't want to do, even though it's his duty to do it, is very similar to how this series began. And just to sort of reiterate from what I said earlier, sometimes when you read information about leaks and you immediately are like, okay, that's horseshit, sometimes it's because it's complete crap and you can never see it happening on screen, but sometimes it's also because you don't want to see that. Sometimes if you don't like a leak, you automatically discredit it. And someone like me who's done over 100 videos on Game of Thrones leaks for Season 8, I've read many of them. I've come across many of them that I don't like. And I find myself less likely to believe a leak if I don't like it. So just because you don't agree with something doesn't mean it ain't true.
You're spoiling it. You're spoiling everything.
Alright, and with that being said, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video. The like goal is going to be 1,420. Also, make sure you're subscribed, and then, this is the most important part, make sure you have your notifications turned on, so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long night. Super special shout out to every single person watching this video right now, and a special thank you to every single member of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews. I want to thank you all so much. My name's Mark, and this has been Sir Hunts Reviews.